Hi, I'm Charles Shelton-Agar. I'm the General Manager of Audience Growth for News Corp Sport and Wagering Brands.
Hi, I'm Ben Parsons. Welcome to the Playa Power podcast. Joining me is Charles from News Corp. You might know it from news.com, Daily Telegraph, lots of titles. Charles, you've worked in sports content. You've worked in what works. You've looked at how to make things work better. Give me a really big helicopter view for an athlete that's just starting their journey about what they should be looking for and what resonates with audiences that you've seen.
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me. The biggest thing that athletes should look at is what makes them authentic and what makes them likable. Harness what the power of their brand is, harness what they think consumers would be interested in, look at the trends in the market and connect your authenticity with what's trending in the market right now.
Yeah, so we talk about lots of things around how you build your brand, right? So in basics, it's everyone has 2 to 5 brand pillars. You're trying to authentically identify them for yourself, and then you're trying to personify them on social, right? Within words are simple, execution's always hard. And then if your brand aligns to something that's topical, authentically get on it, be a part of it. If it doesn't, and I'll use mining as an example, right? If mining is a big moment in time happening just in general press, and your brand doesn't have regional jobs or mining or agriculture, it doesn't matter, a part of your brand pillars, our advice is just shut up. Don't talk about it. But if it is, cool, talk about it because you authentically understand it and you've got a genuine point of view around it. What have you seen in the past when people step out of their lane of knowledge gap? What do you see that happens through the news cycle that isn't very positive for an athlete?
Well, we call it content authority. Do you have content? Do you have, not the right, but do you have the authenticity and the angle to speak about a topic that's relevant and you have the knowledge to be able to support it? When you see brands or athletes go against the mold on that, basically they come up against 3 massive things. You come up against the commercial test, you come up against the media test, and you come up against the pub test. If you fail the pub test, it means your audience isn't thinking you're authentic, they're thinking you're whiny, they're thinking you're out of scope, and they'll challenge you on that and you'll find it hard to engage with them. From a corporate perspective, they'll think that you're challenging what they like to do. They won't want to necessarily work with you. They'll think that you're not going to get on board with their brand and that your opinions are going to go against what their goals are. And from a media perspective, it's pretty simple as why is this person talking about something that they have no authority to talk about. If you've got authority, absolutely work with them. But if you don't, it's like the old thing is stick to your lane.
You've also spoken about halo, which I really like the way you articulate. Can you just talk us through what you think the halo effect is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the halo effect is pretty simple. Basically, within the sporting world, the largest and most viewed events on TV and everything are all sporting events. They are some of the biggest and most valuable brands in the world. By being within that system and being under those brands in that, you have the halo effect of the audience and fans that come with it. A great example is our Australian Olympians. As soon as you become an Olympian or you get picked for the team, you fall under the beautiful halo of the Olympics, the Australian Olympic Committee, which means you've got a whole country behind you supporting you, and you've also got all the positive community and international brand strength that comes with being an Olympian.
You also use discoverability as a word, and I just want you to delve into what do you mean by the word discoverability?
So the hardest thing for any brand to do or any person to do in the social world and the media world is be discovered, is be found and be seen and be grown. As an athlete, you have the phenomenal step ahead of all your competitors in the space because you are easily discovered. Your name's on the back of your jersey. Your name is announced when you run on the field. You're aligned to brands and teams. Kids are following you, kids are picking you up early, you're part of fantasy games, you're seen in media, you're seen in this. You already have a discoverability step ahead, and your ability to use that by jumping into those platforms and engaging with brands and audience gives you all the leverage you need to be able to grow your personal brand. Because what you do is once you move from discoverability, then you move into authenticity. Your audience starts, they see you, they know you, they relate to you, they engage with you. So then you've fostered the audience that you've already built and you can grow it and they become yours. And then you do one-to-one feedback loops, and suddenly this audience that already knew you as that player on the field who scores that great try or performs that great act knows you as a person because they see you behind the scenes and there's someone that they want to relate with daily from their social platforms. And then brands pick that up trying to capture that audience.
I want to put your way back hat on and talk about when you were partnering content with brands, right? Can you just talk us through when you were doing that? What were the brands really after in their content and the learnings from that for an athlete when they're going through this journey of, discoverability in their own world around commercialization?
Absolutely. So one of the things that brands want is they want to be connected with the emotion of the moment. They want what the audience is feeling in that moment of elation or commiseration in sport, which only sport can do. They want to be tied to that. They want to put a tagline to that or a brand to that. It's why brands are sponsoring the touch judge decisions and the try no try. They want to be attached to that moment. When you go back through and you're understanding how to build content for those brands, you go through the history of how your audiences engage with certain moments, you find consistencies in those, and you build content that builds to those moments that brand engages with. What an athlete can do is either have been in that moment and talk about it and bring that authenticity and that realism and bring the fan into that moment so that the fan can see exactly how it happened and the brand all brought that to you. So the brand's bringing it to the audience, you're giving them the behind the scenes that the fan want and they're remembering that moment from themselves and building an emotional connection. Therefore, the emotional connection is happening between you as the talent and the brand as well.
Because every athlete, right, can generate a story. And one of the things, whether you're trying to be the state champion and you're 15, or you're representing your country in the Olympics, or you're in a broadcast sport where you're doing stuff right, storytelling is a long-held tradition. Indigenous used to do it, right? So we love a good storytelling moment, and athletes have the ability to engage in that area that not many people get to engage on because we all want to be an athlete, right? We're not quite an athlete. But where do you see in previous times where content has really defined an athlete because of their great content moment?
I think there's a number of examples. I think the old school day in the life before the scenes, bringing people into the moment of what the athlete's experiencing. I think in the past, it's always come from the docuseries. There's always been that kind of broader piece. I think social media has given that tool back to the athlete and they can show the get ready with me before it. Here's a day in the life of me in the Olympics Village. Here's me prepping before that. Fans want to go deeper into the experience of being an athlete. And it used to be the role of the media in a lot of cases to help people with that access, but now athletes are empowered to drive that themselves because they've got the tools to be able to do that. I go back to watching documentaries about Rugby World Cup, seeing athletes before the final and the pressure of mounting and all the pressure that goes on them. You read the stories of Olympians who their family have built archery centres in the back of their farms. And people are seeing these stories and are suddenly connecting with these people because they see that they've got struggles or overcoming objectives. They see them on the big moment and then they understand the story behind it and they connect deeper with the person.
And when you're trying to build your content library, right, some things are going to work, some things aren't. Yeah. Talk me through how you've seen big media organisation cope with not great content that you thought was going to pop and be that magic moment not happen. How does a big media company process that?
I mean, it depends on which media company. Some media companies go, that didn't work, okay, move it aside, on to the next one. We've got 10 different pieces of going. Other ones say they analyse what went wrong with it, why didn't it connect, what did we miss on that? But I think sometimes content seems forced. Branded content, sponsored content almost feels like it went through a phase where the brand was like bearing down on you. It needs to add to the user. It needs to be audience driven. It needs to be what problem or what piece of information am I solving for my user? And how are you enabling me to have that solved? So if I'm really interested in something, or I want to know something, I want to know a deeper analysis, or I want to know more of this, if you're giving me that content, I'm going to engage with it. But if it's a brand or someone going, we want to tell you about this, if the audience isn't interested in it, they won't. So there are tools we all use. There's tools News Corp has to be able to understand its audience. There's tools that the big tech people use. There's, you use Google Analytics systems. You use Chartbeat. We have a program called Verity. You use SEMrush from a social trending perspective. There's a whole bunch of tools out there.
Okay, break it down. You've never used one of these tools, right? You're an athlete.
Yep.
You're 16, and you're going, okay, what tool and how do I plug it in? Just walk through the very fundamental basics.
So the very first thing I do is I would Google myself, or I would Google something I'm interested in, and then you look at the top organic SEO searches, and then you go down to the top 10 questions asked, and you see if you're in a position to answer those questions, because that is the largest amalgamator of questions and content telling you what people are interested in. So solve the problems that have been delivered in front of you. On top of that, you then go to the social worlds. You find athletes that you find interesting, or talent you find interesting. You track what their views are. You see what's trending. You see which things have worked for them, which haven't. You see how those things have engaged with audiences. You read the comments. You understand all of the network pieces that are moving. You then go into your more traditional news pieces and you think, what topics are they talking about and how they're talking about it on their entertainment shows? What information is the analyst talking about at their pre-game or post-game? If I'm reading my newspapers, what's the DPS content? What's the big story today? What's going on? And do I have a voice in that matter? Is that something I can engage with? Then if you want to keep going deeper in it, look at the brands that are engaging with it. Look at the brands that are sponsoring and why they're sponsoring them. Look at the brands that are engaging across multiple sports or indulging in some sports. If there's a brand that's really into community, reach out to them and say, I'm a community athlete in this area. You're sponsoring that. I'd love to work with you on how you're building content and just understand why you're investing in it and to thank you for investing in this content. The brands aren't your enemies. The media isn't your enemy. They're all there to make a wonderful product for an audience, and you want to be part of that.
An athlete that's, started at humble and grown themselves into a great content producer.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bloke and a Bar Boys have done an amazing job to being not necessarily one of the greatest NRL players, but now one of the biggest voices in the NRL. I think people like Matty Johns, not necessarily the best footballer in his family, and yet has managed to carve himself one of the best entertainment and sports careers in the business. From a global perspective, you look at the guys who run the Champions League commentary, like Thierry Henry, who know that their brand is that they're going to be a little bit arrogant, a little bit this, but they ride into it and people love it. You look at LeBron James, who's gone from hero to absolute villain with the decision, but then being able to turn that round and be, the greatest basketballer of all time, in my opinion. And I think there is a roadmap of people of how they've done this. And some of them have done it via really just being authentic to themselves. If they're really good at analysing it, they analyse. If they're funny and they're larrikins and they're Fletch and Hindy, be funny. Be funny in larrikins and Fletch and Hindy. If your brand as a footballer was that you're tough as nails and you can't be beaten on that, be Gordon Tallis and be your opinions are tough as nails and your opinions come with that. Understand what made you great as an athlete and move it into as great as a contributor and as a brand. Yeah,
one of the athletes that I've always thought has done a good job, even though he's polarising, understanding his own brand, is Anthony Mundine.
Yeah.
I think he understands his brand values and what they represent. And to be honest, Djokovic is another one to me that understands his own brand and has held the line forever and a day around it. And I think, he's polarised people, he's been hated, and now he's sort of being loved. But I think they're two athletes that I point to and go, even not everybody likes them and everybody loves them, they've done a very good job of understanding their brand and personifying that brand in all types of situations, even when they're under pressure.
Well, Anthony Mundine has topic authority on what he talks about, and he comes with, and he uses that, and he knows his role within his community, and he absolutely represents it. I think Djokovic is an interesting case because when it comes down to the space that you work in, here's a good example of looking at your competitors in that space and thinking, well, I'm never going to win the clean cut one. I'm never going to beat Roger Federer in that space. He is handsome, he's put together, he's got great sponsorships, no one looks better in a tuxedo. I'm not going to win that. So I'm going to go down the joker. I'm going to be my way of doing it and take on that. Because sometimes you look at an athlete and they want to go, well, I want to be the next X. But if you look at anyone successful in the space, they've never said they want to be the next X. They want to be the first them. And I think from an athlete's perspective, you've got to look at what is your take on that's going to make it be, I'm not going to win that space. Some athletes might. They might become the greatest athlete. Nathan Cleary might be the greatest rugby league player of all time now. I mean, you might become that, and his whole future might be the GOAT. But if it's not, then he needs to find what it's going to be, and how that's going to work for him.
And go to an Olympic sport, right? Mm-hmm. You get a 1 in 4 year cycle where you are cherished and loved by the country. Yes, you compete in internationals and domestic competitions, but you don't get the gravitas of exposure that you do through the Olympics. If you're an athlete in that cycle, in an Olympic sport, and you have that once every 4 years, and they plan it, do you think they should be planning their whole off-field moment as well, like through Absolutely. That process?
I mean, I've worked closely with the Australian Olympic Committee for years, and one of the things that they work wonderfully with their athletes is understanding that from an athlete's perspective, it's all about peak performance going into it. So the way that they do their training regimens is to be at their absolute pinnacle at peak at the right moment. So you can imagine when they changed the date of an Olympic Games, all of that threw out the window, and they were all planning to be perfect for a certain point and then had to move that. Now they're talking about, okay, how are you going to do the same thing from a brand perspective? How are you going to build your brand? How are you going to work with partners? How are you going to tell your story so that when you're on the pedestal or in the spotlight, everyone knows who you are? Everyone is comfortable and seen how you got here, and they know who you work with, so that at the peak moment, both from your performance perspective, you also have your peak moment from brand perspective. The most marketable athlete in Australia right now is Sam Kerr. And she has absolutely built a phenomenal brand through her work with Chelsea and playing for that. And then when we came to the World Cup, much like she performed phenomenally there when she wasn't injured, but when she was there, she also performed perfectly from a brand perspective. She was able to peak at the exact time when the audience was with her, much the same as you do from a performance perspective.
Some feedback from coaches talk about timetables and the athlete being busy and how quickly they need to be on the ball for their athleticism, because without athleticism they don't have anything. What do you see the modern athlete looking like?
Well, they got teams around them. Much like you've got your coach and you now got your dietitian and now got your chef, if you can afford to that level, but you've got the people around you who are advising you on all aspects of your body and your performance. You have the people around you who are advising you on your media strategy. If you look at it from the perspective of, if you're building your weekly plan like you would for anything, this is what I'm going to eat, this is what I'm going to train, this is how I'm going to recover. Same principle applies with the communication. This is my audience strategy, this is my segments, this is my channel planning. I mean, channel planning is wild. You're talking about which social platforms you're going to do. Are you going to do long form content? Are you going to do live streaming through Twitch because you want to reach a younger audience? Are you going to be doing YouTube shorts? Are you going to be just driving TikTok from a vertical video perspective? Are you going to be making sure that big rounds coming up? Are you going to access and reach out to journos and reach out to the media so you can be part of the conversation heading into Magic Round? All of these things come down to what audience are you trying to reach? What are your goals from that audience? How are you going to do it? Segment it, understand their behaviors, understand what drives them, understand what type of content they're interested in, and make mistakes. Do different trends. One, you can delete stuff, and two, people don't mind. It's a feed. The feed will always go on. There's always going to be a new paper the next day. There's always going to be new content, and you just got to keep working at it. We
always say, because everything you just said can sometimes overwhelm an athlete that's just starting out. And so a lot of our advice is just do one thing and do it well, right? Just get runs on the board and build momentum. And it's exactly like training for your professional career, right? You don't all of a sudden do all the training drills for every practice moment in one session. You do one and you refine it and get good at it, and then you go to the next and build your repertoire of skills up. So when you're seeing athletes that are trying to build it and are trying to get going in their content sphere, what's some advice around people that aren't content creators giving you advice?
Well, the interesting thing about, so say if you take the social network for perspective, the social networks don't build any content. They rely solely on the user to build it. So they want you to use them. They want you to provide content, and they will work with you on how to make that work. I think if you're young, as a bare bones, you've got to think about just check what your username is. Don't just go with the joke because you think it's funny. If it's going to become your professional badge, it's your name, it's what you do, it's attached to who you are. You've got to understand that there are small decisions you make early on that do have an impact down the road. You know, everyone remembers creating a Hotmail account and the horrific names we used to have, and then we all had to change them later on in life as we got professional because we couldn't send our resume with the old Hotmail account we have. The same principle goes with you're an athlete. If you started an Instagram account when you were younger and suddenly you've started taking off in your later teenage years becoming an athlete, make sure that username is something you're comfortable with someone searching and finding your content on. Delete some of the stuff you want to do and make sure that is an entry point to you as an athlete, and that's part of who you are.
One of the things that I see quite consistently in content is partnerships, and sport doesn't seem to do this from an athlete perspective very well, where they'll partner with another athlete and be a day in the life of that athlete, or maybe they're talking to the referee or whatever it is. You know, I don't see a lot of collaboration like you see on other content verticals, whether it be fashion or as basic as entertainment or those things. What are you seeing as, like, where would you start if you're an athlete and you were trying to like partner with people or things? Where do you think they should start?
I mean, when you go back to the segmentation, you go back to topic authority. You go, I'm an athlete and I play AFL. So your instinct is to just build AFL content, and you want to be part of the AFL universe and you want to do that. There isn't much cross-pollination between people who are wanting to, say, watch a show which has got a former NRL athlete and a former AFL athlete working together, because those two audiences are just so segmented in the way they view. As NRL fans, I just read NRL, I read my South content, I'm an NRL fan, and AFL's vice versa. So I think if you're starting out, you find either the topic areas that you're interested in, who's doing well in them, or you find the personalities that are doing well in them, and you try and work with them. Now, there are some contributors out there who are not former athletes or who are creating general sport content, of which you can come into that space with some topic authority. I can talk about this sport in this environment in this space with you to add value, or you go directly to your area and say, I can add to the conversation by giving a different perspective or a younger perspective or a new perspective. And those perspectives in themselves become unique, and that's what audience is attached to. Mason Cox is a great example. He's an American playing for Collingwood. That, like, if you were doing like a elevator pitch on a sports podcast in Australia, it's 7-foot American, plays AFL for Collingwood, wins premiership. It's like, yep, sold. That's really interesting. So you can find the way which is personality driven, is it topic driven, is it niche driven, understand which ones you want to go into and where you can add authority straight away and relevance.
Yeah, I think the big one is, topic for me, like whether it's cooking or classic cars or watch collection or whatever your thing that you're into, there's a bunch of other people that are into it as well, and how do you collaborate with them and be authentically engaged around that topical matter.
Christian Petrarca's food content is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's just what he's cooking and what he's eating, but he's now partnering with brands who want to get into the sports space. They can't get into the sports space for the traditional way of sponsoring teams or sponsoring broadcasts or sponsoring media. So they find an athlete who is aligned to their topic area, which is food creation, and they partner there. And suddenly it all happens quite organically, but it's just he's a good cook and he likes cooking and he uses the platform to grow an audience.
Do you see that brands are commanding more engagement in that style of content?
Absolutely. I mean, it used to be one of the plans, one of the channel strategy. Now it's a core channel strategy. I think, influencer marketing, the growth of talent agencies, the growth of that is no longer a niche part of it all. It's an integral part of a brand's media strategy. It's the one-to-one communication. It's the emotional connection you get by attaching yourself to an athlete or to a talent, and how that can grow the positive sentiment with your brand.
And if you were an athlete right now, how big's the opportunity? Would you put your foot down as much as you're training to build your comms and brand plan, or are you sitting back and watching?
No, I would get into it as quickly as possible in the best way I could. Even if it's just find your best mate who you can have really natural conversations with, start doing a podcast about what it means to be a junior athlete. Just start talking to each other, start building stuff and start putting it out there. Build the content, build the brand, find mates, and just start doing as much as you can. Technology has empowered the ability for athletes to reach audiences through, you can then chuck a couple of $100 against it and do some targeting. Find out what's working with you. The analytics will come when you get the audience. The tools are all there, and they've never been more accessible. And because you can overcome the discoverability thing by being an athlete and potentially wearing the jersey or aligning to the brand you're working with, you're in a great opportunity. And media companies are looking for content too. They all want to find the next future athlete. They want to find the next superstar and the next thing. So reach out to them, reach out to contacts and say, hey, listen, can I record in your studio? Can I build this with you? I don't want to be paid, I don't want to do anything, I just want to start building it. And they'll work with you.
How do you contact them? Like, give some tactics, because what do you Google them and?
I mean, it's still the old school ways. It's I would say it's still mates and mates and mates. Or you go through Playa Power, find you on LinkedIn. It'll help you. You use the LinkedIn systems. Go to your media manager at your club. Go to all of them. Find contacts. Whatever you want to do that starts. Just get rolling with it. There's no perfect solution. There's no dumb solution. It's just getting out there.
Do you feel that when athletes start to generate content, right, and you're starting to see it in the podcast world especially, right, you're starting to see those stories uncovering, and then you're starting to see them feed up into most broadcasters of sport. Do you see a trend happening where the content has always been king, right? Mm-hmm. And Nike taught me that context is queen, and I love that saying. When you're building out your plans, do you think they should have a year plan, or are they planning a quarter, or how do you do a basic plan so it's not so overwhelming that you are scared to do it?
Well, it's this. I mean, my experience with athletes has always been that they're really good at putting an end goal. They're really good at, my end goal is to be a premiership player. My end goal is to be standing there in gold representing my country and winning this. If you have a similar media end goal, which is I want to be the third person on a panel, which is I want to have an independent voice in that. Put that same end goal and do the same process you do and work backwards. Work backwards from how you want to do that. And it's, I've never seen an industry so wonderfully built on goals and wonderfully built on the process of getting to an outcome than athletes. They are so good at that. It's literally in their DNA. It's what separates them from everyone else, is not only their ability to set goals and outcomes and drive to them, it's overcoming the obstacles of getting them and then finally delivering when us mere mortals didn't think we could in that moment. Same principle goes with all of it. If you want to be something in the end and you want to think, my football career could only be 3 to 5 years, or it could be 15 years, but eventually my football career will end. And the amount of work I put into my next phase of the career after that is going to define the next 30 years of my life, which is significantly longer than your playing career. So invest early on and you'll be successful.
You've built your plan, you're delivering on your plan, you're delivering content, you're getting heckled from your teammates.
Yeah.
About you being a person of note all of a sudden.
Yeah.
What do you think they should do?
Push back. Isn't sports banter part of the culture of sport for years and years and years? I'm just jealous that you're doing well somewhere else. I mean, if it's impacting your performance on the field, that's a different thing. You've got a job to do. But fundamentally, if your fans have got issues, if you've got a player and your teammate is like, oh, they said it was stuff, bring him on the next episode. Okay. Bring everyone wants to see the locker room banter. Bring the banter to the people.
That's great. Takeaways, if you're starting from scratch out of this conversation, what do you think athletes should be doing? Like, give me your top couple of things.
I think the very first thing all athletes should do is understand the opportunity that they have. Understand that by simply being an athlete in their field, with the access they have, with the brands and the teams they play for, they overcome the discoverability problem. They are known entities before they go in. Then I would just look at what you want to be, what you want to do, what space you want to do afterwards. If you want to be a coach and you want to do that stuff, that still doesn't mean you can't build coaching content online. That still doesn't mean you can't do any of these things. So understand the value of your discoverability. Understand what makes you authentic. Understand what makes you authentic as a person and as an athlete, and the voice and the topic authority you can speak to. See what brands are doing out there and just get involved. Just dive straight in. Dive straight in.
Thanks for your time.
No worries. Thank you.